Hello guys, welcome back to another Android Volley tutorial. Today we are going to learn about how to make a simple JSON object request using Volley. So here I am going to use a local host. Here I use a WAMP server application. So first thing I have to start WAMP server. I start WAMP server. Okay, now the server is running. Now open your browser. Go to the homepage of WAMP server. So type localhost on address bar. This is the homepage of WAMP server. Now go to PHP myadmin. Here we have a database called the userdb. That database contains a table called the user info. In that table, there are three columns: name, email, and mobile, and there is one row of data is available. Now we are going to fetch this information in the form of a JSON object and display this information in an Android application. So the first thing, we have to place a PHP script in the web server. So go to the installation folder of WAMP server, go to the root directory, and here we have a PHP file called getinfo.php. So within this PHP script, first here I declare some variables. I declare a username, password, host name, and database name. And here is the connection statement. This statement make a connection to the database. Here we use the method called the MySQLi connect, and you have to pass the host name, username, password, and database name. And here is the SQL statement, SQL query. And here is the statement that execute the SQL query. We use the function MySQLi query, and you have to pass the connection and SQL query. And if the query return a non-zero value, if it is greater than 0, in that case we fetch the row using a function called MySQLi fetch assoc. So we get the row within this variable called the row. And finally we made the JSON object. The object has properties like name, email, mobile, and finally we encode the JSON object and pass it. So this is the PHP script we are going to use. So now the server side is okay, and now we can create the Android application. So open Android Studio and start a new Android Studio project. So the first thing, you need to add the needed permissions inside your manifest file. So here you need to fetch information from a remote server. So you need to add the internet permission inside your Android manifest.xml. So add the needed permissions. Okay. So here we are going to use the Volley library. So you need to add the needed dependency for using Volley. So open your Gradle script file and add the needed dependencies. Okay, now you have to make a project sync. Okay, now the project sync finishes successfully. Close this file. Now go to activity main.xml. Now we can create the UI of the application. So here we have to display informations like name, email, mobile number. So here I am going to add some text views. So add a first text view. Change the text into name, appear here. Name is going to appear here. And change the ID of this text view into name. Now add another text view for display email address. So add another text view and change the text into email, appear here, and change the ID into email. Now we need another text view for display the mobile number. So add another text view, change the text into mobile, appear here, mobile number, appear here. Also we have to change the ID of the text view into mobile. Okay, to fetch the information we need a button. So add a button. Okay, now change the text of the button into get information. Get information. Okay, now the GUI is ready. Change the ID into BN. Change ID of the button into BN. Now the UI is ready. Now go to main activity.java. Here we need to declare some variables. First I'm going to declare some variables for button. I name it as button. Now declare variables for text views. Here we need 3 text views: name, email, and mobile. Now we need to initialize these variables. First initialize the button variable, button equal to typecast that one into button. Now find the view by id r.id.bn. Now initialize the text views. First one is name. Cast it into corresponding Java class. Here it is text view. Now find it r.id.name. Now initialize the email text view. Email. Find it. First typecast into text view. Now find it r.id.email. Now we need to initialize the last text view, mobile. Typecast into text view. Now find it r.id.mobile. Okay. Now we can create some click listener for the button. So button dot set on click listener. Okay. So here I use a Genymotion virtual device. To access the local host, we need to know the IP address of this computer. So open command prompt and type ipconfig and find out the IPv4 address. Here is my IPv4 address. So now we need to specify the URL for the JSON object. So declare a string variable, string JSON URL equal to HTTP. To access localhost, you have to specify the IPv4 address of your computer. So here is my IPv4 address. Now specify the PHP script name. Our PHP script file name is getinfo.php. Okay. So now we can create the. So before going to use this URL, we can test it. So copy this URL, open your browser and paste it on the address bar. Here is the response from server. This is a simple JSON object. The object contains properties like name, email, and mobile. Okay, the URL is working fine. So now we can create the JSON object request. So JSON object request equal to, I name it as JSON object request equal to new JSON object request. First specify the request method. Request dot method dot, here we are going to use the post request method. Now specify the URL, the server URL. Now you need to specify the request body. Here there is no request body, so you can pass null for it. Now you need to specify the response listener, new response listeners. And the last argument, you have to specify an error listener, new error listener. Okay, So to avoid this error, actually it need a string for the request body. So just typecast into a string to avoid the error. Okay, so we get the response within this method called onResponse, and here only one parameter is a JSON object. So now we are going to fetch information from the JSON object and display it using the text views. So name.setText response dot and call the property name. The first property name is name. Of course, this statement makes some exception, JSON exception. So you need to put this statement within a try-catch block. So add a try-catch, so JSON exception. Okay, now specify the second value, email.setText response.getString, get data from the JSON object, get string, and here the property is email. Now the third value, mobile.setToText response.getString, and the last property is mobile. Okay, so now the JSON object request is ready. Now we need to add this one into a request queue. So here I am going to use the Singleton pattern. So we have to create a Java class for making the Singleton pattern. So right click the package and create a new Java class. I name it as mySingleton. mySingleton. Now within this class, first we need some variables. So private static, first create an instance of this class mySingleton. I name it as minstance. Now create a variable for request queue, private request queue. I name it as request queue. Now we need some context variable. So private static context. I name it as mctx. Okay. Now we are going to create a method that will return the request queue. So public request queue, and the method name is get the request queue. There is no arguments needed for this method. And here first we check a condition if the request queue is already declared or not, initialized or not. If request queue is null, in that case we have to initialize the request queue. So request queue equal to volley dot new request queue, and use the context, get application context, and finally return the request queue from this method, return request queue. Okay, now we need a constructor for this class. So private mySingleton, here we need one parameter, it is an object of context. So first here I am going to initialize the context variable. So mctx equal to context. Now initialize the request queue by calling the method get request queue. Okay. Now we are going to create a method that will return an instance of this class. So create a method, public static is a synchronized method, and it will return an instance of mySingleton, and the method name is getInstance, and this method needs one argument. It is a context object. Here we check a condition if the request queue, if the m instance is already null. If m instance is null, in that case we have to initialize that object. So m instance equal to new my singleton and pass the context. And finally, return that instance from this method. So return m instance. Okay, now we need another method for add the request to the request queue. So now define a method that accept a request. So public void add it to request queue, and this method need only one argument. It is a request. So we need one argument, request. Okay, now we need to add the request to the request queue. So request queue dot add and specify the argument request. Okay, now the singleton class is ready. Now we can use it. So now go to main activity.java. Here we already defined the JSON object request. Now we need to add the JSON object request to the request queue. So my singleton dot get instance and pass the context main activity dot this. Now call the add to request queue method and specify the request queue. Here the request queue is JSON object request. Okay, so if there is an error, we have to display a toast.make text main activity dot this. Now specify the message something went wrong. Now specify the duration for the toast dot make it into short, and finally make it visible. Now print the error stack trace. So error dot print stack trace. Okay, now the coding is finished. Now we can test the application. So now run it and select a virtual device. Open that virtual device. Okay, now the application available on this virtual device. Before going to run this application, I will show you the data available on this server. Here on our database, only one row of data is available. There is some name, email and mobile. You can see the data. Now we are going to fetch that information to the Android application. Okay, now the data available on the Android application. This is how we make a JSON object request using Volley. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.